the appeal hearing, and we'll have the roll call by the staff. Ms. Vargas, I believe.
My apologies. Just trying to unmute and bring it up. Roll call: Sarah Buchanan.
Present.
Nathan Dennison.
Present.
Luis Garcia.
Here.
Curtis Gardner.
Here.
I do know that he is trying to connect, and I believe he just connected. So
Yes.
Curtis Gardner.
Here.
Daniel Hamilton.
Present.
Kim Hines-Lepsey.
Here.
Oliver Howell is excused. Vernon Payne.
Present.
Jaquise Robertson is excused. Larry Tolbert.
Present.
Thank you. That will be all for the C-SPRED members. And of course, Patsy Moore, myself, Patricia Vargas as recording secretary are on, and our appellant, Mr. Marcus Johnson, is as well.
Please note for the record that we have, I think it's 100% attendance, and therefore we do have a quorum, and we shall proceed. Deputy City Manager Moore, will you provide us with a summary of the appeal, please?
Certainly. I would also like to provide a note about closed captioning. We have had a question about closed captioning. The City of Kalamazoo's live streaming platforms, Facebook and YouTube, unfortunately do not currently offer live closed caption. However, that these meetings are recorded and upon conclusion are made available with closed caption for the hearing impaired. So definitely wanted to make that note. Mr. Chairman and the board, this evening, Mr. Marcus Johnson filed a citizen complaint relative to an interaction with Department of Public Safety on April 14, 2020. Mr. Johnson's complaint alleges that he was kidnapped, assaulted, and robbed by KDPS officers. The Office of Professional Standards opened an investigation of these allegations. Based on the investigation, Chief Thomas' finding was exonerated for the officers involved. The chief did find misconduct not included in the investigation relative to the use of one officer's body camera not being activated during the interaction. Mr. Johnson was notified of the chief's finding and has chosen to appeal the chief's finding to the city manager. The city manager hereby refers this appeal to the Citizens Public Safety and Review Board and requests a recommendation from the board. This appeal is before you this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. I'm going to share with the board, repeat for the board, and especially for you, Mr. Johnson, and for the representatives from our Professional Standards Office. The process has to be adhered to. If you have any questions about the process, Mr. Johnson, please ask. We will be hearing the appeal related to appeal number 2020-0011. Question for the board. Are there any members of the board who are unable to render an unbiased opinion on this appeal due to a relational, financial, or other conflict of interest? If so, signify that now. I will take your silence as you do not have any conflicts. We will hear from the appellant, Mr. Marcus, first, and why he disagrees with the chief's determination of the complaint. Mr. Marcus, it's important for everyone to understand that you will not be, as a part of the process, questioning the Office of Professional Standards. This is not the platform for that to happen. This is the appeal process where you will present your appeal. And so you will not direct questions to the representatives from the Office of Professional Standards. You may raise issues and questions in your appeal, of course, but you will not directly question them. Do we understand that, Mr. Marcus, Mr. Johnson?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, sir.
thank you, sir. After hearing from the appellant, we will hear from the investigator to describe the investigation that was undertaken to inform the chief's findings. And likewise, the Office of Professional Standards will not be addressing specific questions to Mr. Johnson. The appellant has requested that the hearing is open to the public. While the hearing is open to the public, we request that there be no outbursts of any kind. I think we control that electronically. While there will not be an opportunity for public comments during the hearing, all regular board meetings are open to the public and offer an opportunity for public comment on any topic. I do not know how that's being handled since we're in this special situation with the Zoom meetings, but we welcome public comments on our hearings, the open hearings. After hearing from the appellant and the investigators, the board will adjourn and go into closed deliberation. Mr. Johnson, at the conclusion of its deliberations and within 15 days of the close of the hearing, the board will prepare a written report that will be submitted to the city manager with a recommendation to sustain or amend the chief's findings. The city manager shall have final authority to sustain or amend the chief's finding and will notify you, Mr. Johnson, of his determination within 20 business days following the appeal hearing. Mr. Johnson, do you have any questions, sir, about the process?
No, sir, and I appreciate if I can get off track or whatever, you just stop me and direct me, because I ain't never been in this procedure before.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Now we will hear your appeal, Mr. Johnson, if you could begin that for us.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to stay as, I have PTSD. I'm diagnosed with PTSD, so anxiety. So when I get, emotional, I kind of get excited type. So I'm trying to stay calm. So I'm gonna start here. It started the conflict.
Mr. Johnson, we are having a little bit of a problem hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
There's a lot of static.
Okay.
I think we can hear you.
Does everybody have their phones on mute or computer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Okay. So the start of the conflict with myself and the Kalamazoo Police Department started back in October. My name is Marcus Johnson, co-founder of Young Kings and Queens, Inc., a youth organization located here in Kalamazoo. Also, my organization is the organization that kicked off the need for the transportation for the youth. So they,
Mr. Johnson, I'm wondering if you could possibly sign out and maybe try to sign back in again. We want to make sure that you are heard as well as possible, and we're just not getting a clear understanding of your words right now. Would you like to sign out and attempt to call in again?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
This is Patricia Vargas. We did the test. Can you try just merely turning off the video off of your phone? Our IT department believes that might help with the reception.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to test.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It does sound better. I mean, I don't know if the movement of where you were at maybe changed the reception, and maybe you want to try it with the video, but if it's still is hard for us to hear, maybe we could try that first before you sign off and sign in again.
I'm gonna try to look my location. It might be the air conditioning. So it might be the air conditioning in the house. Is it clear now?
It's
Think
still
we can-
staticky.
Yes.
Okay. So, like I say, my name is Marcus Johnson. I'm the co-founder of Young Kings and Queens, Inc., a youth organization located here in Kalamazoo. And the conflict, and I've been trying to explain this with the Kalamazoo Police Department. The conflict started back in October. What happened was there was an initiative that started all the youth in high school in the city of Kalamazoo to be able to ride transit, the bus system, for free. So when that was implemented, a lot of fights broke out downtown at the transit bus. And there was a lot of complaints from the youth about the mistreatment of the police down at the bus system. So myself and a few others started going down to the bus station to monitor and to interfere with misconduct on behalf of the youth and behalf of the officers. So there was a lot of static about that. Even meetings with the transit system, emails back and forth with Chief Thompson. It was a lot about that. The officers, which, like I said, I do have PTSD, so when it comes down to police, I get anxiety and things of that nature. So when I had the incident on April 14th, I really didn't recognize or recall the officers that was involved. However, after I played it back a few times in my mind and actually watching the body cam and the video, I recognized, but I already recognized the officers. I even told the police. I was like, man, the officers, Danielle, she said, so I don't know you. I said, I can understand that. However, the officers that worked this beat on the north side and this time from that 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock time, those officers know me because they had many run-ins with me. And like I say, the officers that was on April 14th had run-ins with me already down at the bus station. They was responding and it was called down to the bus station, and that was the biggest conflict, is that me and the adults and parents that was down there was basically holding everybody accountable, the police and the children, and the police actually didn't like that. So the fast forward, we doing this during the pandemic. April 14th, we on social distancing, we on all this precautionary actions because of COVID-19, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm at home, 1021 North Road Street. The neighbor on Westnich, where my dogs was in front of, came and knocked on my door and said, hey, your dog got loose. Like I say, the community know me on the north side because I deal with the youth, you know. I throw back to school jams and etc. So everybody in this area pretty much know me. They come knock on my door, tell me my dog's loose. So I slipped on my hoodie and my shoes, jump in my car, follow him to where he at. When I get there, there's officers and animal control there. So I get out of my car, which the officer made clear it was a black Mercedes-Benz in the report. He made that clear. So I get out of my car. I approach, I told him, I said, hey, how you doing? My name is Marcus Johnson, or something to that familiar, something to that extent. I'm the owner of the dog, something like that. I don't know exact words I use, but it was something like that. So The officer, these your dog, this your dog, both of them? I said, yeah. So I'm like, damn, how y'all get out? I'm actually talking to my dog. My dog's trained, you know what I mean? They're very trained. So they give me my dog, they release my dog, and I put him in the backseat of my car. The animal control guy said something to the extent of, like I said, I can't recall word for word because, you know, I just can't recall word for word. But he said something to the extent of, keep your dogs locked up or something. I said, I don't know how they got out, and I was, you know, going to the car or something to that extent. The police approached me. Now, I will say I do have a criminal history. I do have a past. Everybody noticed about me. When I came home 4 years ago, my wife and I, we started a youth organization to try to change some of the stuff that I kind of take blame for, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s. You see what I'm saying? I'm 40 years old now. So I'm like, you know, let me try to change some things. So when the police approached me, give me your ID. Oh, I'm not giving you my ID. Give me my ID for what? What's going on? That's the first thing. Cause I'm getting in my car now. My dog's in my car, and they say it's a Mercedes Benz. So I got two outside dogs in the backseat of my car. So I'm already frustrated because the dogs got out. Now they in the backseat of my car, which they don't be in. Now he coming to ask me to give him my ID. Well, I'm gonna give you my ID. Wait. You gotta identify yourself. Well, in the state of Michigan, I identified myself. I said, my name Marcus Johnson. And you know, they still ain't told me nothing, so I'm trying to leave, man. My name Marcus Johnson. Give me. The officer started yelling. They said, I was the one yelling. Give me your ID. You know, that authoritative matter that the police always try to take with a citizen. You see what I'm saying? I'm like, man, listen. I identify myself. What am I under arrest? They ain't told me nothing. So if I ain't under arrest, let me go. I'm gonna go. So I reach for my car door. Cause they still ain't said that. They still ain't said you being detained. You being detained, and you finna get a ticket for dogs being loose, for dogs and robbed. They still ain't said nothing to me about why you trying to keep me here. You see what I'm saying? And my understanding of the law, if the officers, it ain't my job to already know what's wrong. The officer's supposed to tell me, okay, you been detained, this violation been committed, this, that. So automatically, I'm starting to feel some type of way. Because they coming at me aggressively. So I'm like, man, I give him my name. I open my door. He's pushed my door. When he pushed my door, I said, man, am I under arrest? I'm asking him, I'm saying, so am I under arrest? What's going on? When I asked him, am I under arrest? I kind of leaned in maybe or something. The guy pushed me. I said, so you just gonna assault me? And when I asked him, I said, are you just gonna assault me from there? Oh, you finna get detained. And he started grabbing on me, pushing on me. That what happened. So at that point, like I say, I got physical injuries too. You see what I'm saying? I have my lower back. I got the balls of this. I got all this is on record. Like I got a dead bone in my ankle. So he pushed me to the side. So at this time, now I'm scared that he would grab me. He looked like it feel like he trying to like throw me off balance and throw me to the ground. So I stick my arm out to, catch my fall if he pushed me down because of my bone situation. You see what I'm saying? Then Perez, he said, you should be detained. He tried to tell me, I'm hearing him say something, I can't remember, but like, you should be detained, Mr. Johnson, you should be detained. I'm like, well, what are y'all putting your hands on me, et cetera? What y'all putting your hands on me for? I haven't did nothing. So I got big shoulders. like I say, everything that I'm saying is documented inside my medical files. I got big shoulders, and over the years of the police putting my arms behind my back, twisting my arms up, my shoulder rotator cuffs, I messed up. So I can't just put my arms, you know, the officer said they squeeze my arms together. Well, I just can't, because I got arthritis and everything, I just can't put my arms, you know, just tight behind my back. You see what I'm saying? So usually they put 2 handcuffs on me and that's another thing the officers never told me. Could you turn around? Could you put your hands behind your back? Could you put these handcuffs up? None of that. They just grabbed me. So I go to jail. I still don't know the intent or nothing. So when I get out, I know it's wrong. I just don't know. I don't know why exactly. I know it's wrong, but I just don't know what the motive is behind it. Now, when I get out, I see the body cam, the full body cam. And then I put the pieces together and I read the reports of the officers. So the full body cam shows this. Officer Perez on the scene, another officer pulled up, the guy. They noticed blood on his hand and this and that. I don't know how it happened, etc. The lady officer pulled up. The lady officer started talking about how much she loved dogs, how she wished she could take the dog home. Perez said, "Take the dog home." And she's like, "I don't know. I was on a beat with another officer, and I took the dog home. So I don't know. I don't think I want to. I'm just playing. I think that what she said is on body cam." So the animal control pulled up. Animal control pulled up, asked for what we got. Officer Perez explains to him, "Well, I pulled down the street. I see these 2 dogs. Lady, which is the oldest one, and they're American bullies. They're not pit bulls either. They're way more expensive than pit bulls and less aggressive, people aggressive. Lady, which is the oldest one, he says, I think she's dangerous or whatever. She's 4 years old and was pregnant. Like she was pregnant right then. The other one, he's just a sweetheart, whatever. And that was the puppy. Smoke, which was the puppy. He wasn't nothing but a year old. That conversation goes on. He said, "Oh, well, I guess I'll just take him in or whatever." When that conversation goes on, I pull up. When I pull up, the lady officer, Crook, who remembered me, which I didn't know, you see what I'm saying, who remembered me and my car from downtown. You see what I'm saying? So I didn't know none of this till I seen the body cam. Because when I pulled up, she said, "Oh, here we go." So the animal control guy said, "Oh, well, this is simple. I'm glad he pulled up. This is a simple thing right now. I'm going to give him a warning, let him go." The governor gave this is all the body cam. The governor said that if it ain't no danger to society or whatever, the operation is obsolete or off or whatever. However he said it. So the lady officer who is so in love with the dogs, but she explained to the other officers, made a statement like, "No, we got to charge him with something, cruelty to animals or something." And animal control like, "We can't charge him with nothing. We don't know it. We can't." The dogs look healthy. Yes, they got a couple skin marks because they do wrestle, bite on each other all day, every day. They in the same pen. You see what I'm saying? So, like, but they look healthy. They look took care of. You know, and she continued. It's like, "Oh no, we got to give them something." The animal control said, "You know what? Well, y'all can take it then. Y'all can take it. Y'all do whatever. I'm through with it." You see what I'm saying? I didn't know none of this until I watched the body cam. You see what I'm saying? So me, I'm automatically assuming the rest of when they came, I didn't know what it was for, but I knew it was a messed up energy off top. So I'm trying to get on. I'm trying to get right back to the house. I ain't trying to have no interaction with the police. I've been on the road. I've been doing a great job in the community. All my interactions with the police have been tragic for me. From a little child, from when they broke into my house as a little child and took me and put me in foster care. You see what I'm saying? Every interaction I had with the police has been bad. And just then, when if you watch the body cam, the aggressiveness in their voice and everything, I'm trying to go home. I'm just trying to get up and keep going. You see what I'm saying? And however, I was in, like I say, they put me in prison. They told me this what I was told from judges, from all the classes that I took and everything. The law fights for you just like it. The law is for you just like it's against you. So if you're going by the law, you shouldn't have no problem. So I came home and tried to live by that. You see what I'm saying? I tried to stay out of trouble, etc. And one thing in the law, I do know, this is the law, that I do not have to produce my driver's license unless I've committed a driving offense. In the state of Michigan, me giving you my verbal name is enough for identification, for me to identify myself. Verbally is enough in the state of Michigan for me to identify myself. That's the law. So if that's the law, how come I can't stand on that? You see what I'm saying? That's what I did. I stood on what I knew was, yeah, I got my license, I got valid driver license, but I haven't been committed, I haven't been stopped or nothing for a driving violation. So what they tried to throw on me was, when we saw you driving, that does not matter. You see a million people driving, but you don't have the right to pull them over and ask them, do you got a driver's license, without them committing a driving violation. You don't have that right. And that's the thing with the police. They feel like they have the right authority over every citizen in the community, even when there's not a threat opposed, even when they're everything. And that what happened. Like I say, I don't know how to express it even no more, but I never swung. I never balled my fist up. I never did none of that, but stood on my rights. And me standing on my rights, they physically assaulted me, took me to jail. And like I said, they already had a ill intent, because they already knew me from the previous run-ins at the Kalamazoo Transit during the month of October and November, when all those fights from the youth was happening down there, and they kept dispatching officers to downtown Kalamazoo, 10 to 15 different cars. So these officers know who I am now. These officers know who I am, and then they try to act like, well, give me your name. You know who I am. I gave you my name. You know what I mean? And I gave you my birthday. If you would have took the time out instead of harassing me and did your job, and hey, we had to watch the Johnson 11/22/79. She would have came back over the mic or walkie-talkie. Like always, yes, we have him 1021 North Road Street, etc., etc., etc. You see what I'm saying? And he didn't do that. They just kept trying to aggravate me, and they had ill intent for doing it. You see what I'm saying? And like I say, that I don't know how to say it nowhere else. It was cruel and unusual punishment, because if it would have been, and that's why I feel this way, because if it would have been my neighbor, this older lady, if her dogs would have got loose, she would have went through nothing. They would have gave her dog back, gave her the warning, just like the animal control did me, and it would have been nothing, especially during a pandemic. You see what I'm saying? Especially all these murders, all this robbery, and all this stuff going on during this pandemic. You ain't even have a call for these dogs. You rolled up and saw these dogs, and within 15 minutes of you seeing the dogs, neighbors saw my dogs and came and got me, and I went and got them. It's a 15 pen in the back. The state of Michigan dogs at large, the language, and that's what in law is all about, the language, and that's why they wrote the report the way they wrote the report on me, is because the language of the state of Michigan, dog at large means the owner has to permit the dog being off a leash or out, you know what I mean, not on the property. You have to permit that. You see what I'm saying? I did everything I could to contain the dogs. You see what I'm saying? And it's not like you get a lot of 911 calls saying dogs loose at 1021 North Road Street. No, you don't have that. You see what I'm saying? So they were smart enough over the years, smart enough to get out a fenced-in pen. I did not permit that. You see what I'm saying? And even Animal Control was trying to talk with the police, and the police just had a press conference saying they so trained in de-escalation and this and this and that. Where was that at with me? All I saw was social injustice on my behalf, man.
Yep. Mr.
That's
Johnson,
all I saw.
Mr.
Yes,
Johnson, I apologize for interrupting you, but I think you have done a wonderful job of summarizing the written information that we have in our possession. I think that you've covered all of those salient points that are associated with your appeal. And I just want to thank you for doing that for us. Now, you've added some more information from your perspective, which I think is helpful. So thank you for that. And I do have a couple of questions for you, clarification. The first clarification I have,
yes,
if it's okay with you, that I ask you a couple of questions. This is not the investigators asking you. This is me asking you. Is that okay with you, sir?
Ask all the questions you need, sir.
Okay. I want to confirm that you have a valid driver's license. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
I want to ask you, did you have your wallet on you that evening?
My license was in my car like always. I keep my license. I keep my license over my head. You know what I mean? So if I get pulled over, I just pull it out and hand it to me. So I had my license. It wasn't in my pocket, but it was in my car.
You had that license in the visor over the driver's side, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Not in the visor, over the door. You know the little part over the door where you can stick it in, like the little edge part? I had it stuck in right there.
Okay. Thank you for giving me that. Those are a couple of really good questions. The other final question I have for you, and try to be as succinct as possible if you can.
Yes, sir.
In your opinion, sir, why did you think the officer was high?
Because like I say, I do have a criminal history, and I come from the drug trade. I come from Benton Harbor, Michigan through the 90s, and I sold plenty of drugs. Yeah, and I know the effect of drugs. So I have a medical marijuana card due to my PTSD and my anxiety. So I know all the symptoms, and I have tried some drugs. You see what I'm saying? I've tried cocaine, I've tried marijuana, I tried ecstasy. You see what I'm saying? I've tried drugs in my life. You see what I'm saying? And everybody knows drugs in the community of the blacks is a lot. You see what I'm saying? So I've been around every type of drug. You see what I'm saying? So an upper is always gonna have your eyes booked, your eyes dilated. You see what I'm saying? So when your eyes wide open, like you very super alert. You see what I'm saying? That means you have an upper. If they low, and you kind of and slow, that's a downer. No matter if it's Xanax or codeine or whatever it is, opiate or anything, no matter what it is, like those drugs has those physical, when you know, those drugs have those physical identities that you can see. And the little short guy eyes was booked. He might not been on cocaine, he might not been on meth, but he probably was on Adderall. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. I totally understand, and I totally get that. And I apologize, but I do have one more question, and then we'll move on to the Office of Professional Standards. My final question is this. When your neighbor came over and told you that those dogs were missing, you hurriedly rushed out of your home. Why did you feel that it was urgent for you to leave your home and go and retrieve those dogs and get them back behind those fences? Why did you do that so
Because
quickly?
they supposed to be. Because they supposed to be inside the fence. That's my property. So first I got to retrieve them and then figure out how they got out.
Yes, sir.
You see what I'm saying? And that was the whole thing. My neighbor, like I say, I have a real great connection with the community of Kalamazoo, especially on the north side. So everybody, I'm not gonna say everybody because everybody don't, but the majority of the people on the north side know who I am. They know I live on Rose Street.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You've answered my question. You rushed out of your house to retrieve those dogs back because they should be behind your fence. And if they're behind your fence, that speaks
Yes,
to
sir.
concern about the safety of the community. Now we'll go on to the report presentation from the Office of Professional Standards. Hold it.
I have one question, Chair, if that's okay.
Sure, go right ahead.
Mr. Johnson, one of the points that's at issue here is that in the original police report, it begins by saying that you refused to identify yourself to the officers on scene. And I just want, for clarity's sake, and you're right, you don't need to produce identification under Michigan law, but I want to hear you say you did, in fact, verbally identify yourself to the officers. Is that correct?
Yes,
Did
sir.
you?
And not only did I verbally do it, it was confirmed at the preliminary hearing because I got 2 resisting destructive assaults on officers. It was confirmed that the judge said he identified himself. If he said it with an attitude, et cetera, he still identified himself. That's not resistance. He said the only time I seen resistance is when he pulled back when y'all grabbed him. And that's what the judge said.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that point. That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Dennison. Appreciate it. Now we'll go on to the Office of Professional Standards, please. Mr. Johnson, would you
Yes,
mind
sir.
would you mind muting your microphone, sir? Thank you, sir. Yeah, please proceed.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to share my screen for a PowerPoint that I brought up, and then at the end, I'm going to also show the video. It shows that the host disabled the participant screen sharing.
Give IT a moment to catch up with you.
Thank you.
Joe, are you?
Danielle, you have co-host now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen okay? And hear me at the same time? All right, perfect. All right, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Danielle Giles. I've been a police officer here at Kalamazoo Public Safety for 15 years. And I've worked in the Office of Professional Standards for the past year, about year and a half. So as mentioned before, we are here reference PCR complaint 2020-0011. The complainant was Mr. Marcus Johnson. I was the investigator assigned, and the involved officers were PSOs Turberg, Perez, and Crooks. The incident date occurred on April 14, 2020 at approximately 11:15 in the morning. The incident took place in the 1000 block of North Westnedge near William Street. Mr. Johnson filed a complaint in regards to this investigation on April 29, 2020. It was investigated by myself and it was later closed out on June 30th of 2020. As noted by DCM Moore, Mr. Johnson did submit a complaint that alleged that he was kidnapped and assaulted and armed robbed by our staff. This complaint was submitted through the KDPS online portal. And during my initial contact with Mr. Johnson, we spoke about and we clarified the actions of officers that Mr. Johnson believed supported all three allegation areas. I will discuss each of these areas as we go on, but for reference, Mr. Johnson did define the following. So for kidnapping, he defined that officers did not have a legal cause to make an arrest and that he was subsequently lodged against his will for the false arrest. For assaulted, Mr. Johnson believed that PSO Turberg's physical contact with his shoulder area during their interaction was an assault. And last, for armed robbery, Mr. Johnson believed that his dogs were seized from his vehicle without authority or permission, and that they were then released to animal control without his permission. Officers were armed with firearms during the time that they took his property, which was his dogs. It should be noted that during my initial contact with Mr. Johnson, he also reported that all three officers knew him by sight and that he believed that he had fulfilled his legal obligation to identify himself verbally when asked. It should be noted, though, from listening to Mr. Johnson's presentation, that he did not bring up any of the previous contact with officers in October, November that he is mentioning tonight. So that was not addressed in my report. So for officer observations, while in patrol, PSO Perez observed two dogs in the roadway on Westnedge Street near William Street. The white dog was holding the brown dog down by its neck. The white dog let go and the brown dog stood up, but then fell over onto the ground 2 times. PSO Perez stopped his vehicle to ensure that the dogs did not get hit by a vehicle and called animal control. Neither dog had a collar, a leash, or any other identifying marks on it. Both dogs had fresh and old injuries and appeared to be in need of veterinarian care. Officers were on scene for approximately 12 minutes prior to the arrival of animal control. And during that time, they were able to get the brown dog secured on a leash. However, they could not get the white dog contained. Within approximately 1 minute of animal control arriving on scene, Mr. Johnson also arrived. The initial observations that were observed, and I'm not going to read these out loud to you, were Kalamazoo Ordinance 719, dogs running at large, and Kalamazoo Ordinance 7-21, vicious or dangerous dogs. It should be noted that the city of Kalamazoo put in the ordinance purpose to ensure the humane treatment of animals by regulating the care and control of these animals within the city. Both of these crimes are 90-day misdemeanors that occurred in the officer's presence. Officers can legally make a warrantless arrest of a 90-day misdemeanor committed in their presence. Additionally, officers are legally and lawfully obligated to investigate crimes that are committed in their presence. When Mr. Johnson arrived on scene, he did advise that he was the owner of the dogs. He did not verbally identify himself at that time. Animal control had advised officers that they were working in a limited capacity due to COVID-19 at the time, and that they were going to allow the dogs to go with Mr. Johnson and just write a case for the violations. Mr. Johnson was asked to place the dogs into his vehicle, which he did do. PSO Turberg then made contact with Mr. Johnson at the driver's side of his car to get his identification for the purpose of writing a criminal complaint. As Mr. Johnson had identified himself as the owner of the dogs, probable cause did exist to make a warrantless arrest of Mr. Johnson for the 2 dog violations. As opposed to making a custodial arrest, however, officers intended to use their discretion and write a complaint against Mr. Johnson. Positive identification, which is usually in the form of a Michigan ID or operator's license, is necessary so as a case isn't written against the wrong person due to someone lying about their name. Incorrect or false information in a police report could lead to a warrant being issued against the wrong person. An example of this would be you making contact with me as an officer and me telling you that my name is Patsy Moore. Without further identification, a warrant could be issued against Patsy incorrectly with be given false information. Officers intended to positively identify Mr. Johnson, then allow him to leave with his dogs. They were then going to write a criminal complaint against him and submit the case to the city attorney for consideration of charges. When asked, Mr. Johnson did verbally identify himself by stating his first and last name. Mr. Johnson is asked for his ID for the purpose, again, of providing positive identification, and Mr. Johnson advised that he did not have it on him. It is a 93-day misdemeanor crime to drive without your license on your person. Although officers did not have original contact with Mr. Johnson for a driving offense, the offense of driving without a license on your person was observed during their contact, which they then investigated. Officers are again legally bound and lawfully bound to investigate crimes that occur in their presence. Another example of this would be if an officer was dispatched to a call of a breaking and entering of a home. Let's say they get to the home and the house wasn't broken into, however, it was spray painted. Officers couldn't ignore the MDP. They would still address the fact that the house had been spray painted, even though they were originally sent there for a B&E. They're still bound to investigate this other crime. Mr. Johnson is asked to spell his name several times and eventually spells his first name while walking closer to PSO Turberg and yelling. During their contact, he does not provide his middle name and only gives limited information after repeated requests by officers. He then opens his car door and takes a step towards his door with the intent of leaving the scene. Mr. Johnson leaving the scene could have caused an officer safety concern, and he'd still not been positively identified. Officers do close the door and tell him that he is not free to leave, again, because he's not been positively identified. Mr. Johnson's behavior and actions on scene were in violation of Kalamazoo City Ordinance 22-20, which is considered interfering. Interfering by Kalamazoo City Ordinance is knowingly or willingly obstructing, resisting, interfering with, and or opposing by physical or non-physical means any public safety officer while the person was engaged in lawful acts, attempts, and efforts in the enforcement of execution of any law, ordinance, rule, order, resolution made, issued, and passed by lawful authority. Mr. Johnson then steps towards PSO Turberg while yelling, and PSO Turberg extends his left open hand in front of him, and it comes into contact with Johnson's right chest shoulder area. PSO Turberg advised that this was done to maintain a safe distance from Mr. Johnson. Contact was made for less than 1 second. Mr. Johnson accused PSO Turberg of assaulting him and then would not answer further questions to identify him. Officers, again, intended to positively identify Mr. Johnson and write a case against him. He would have been allowed to leave with his dogs after he was positively identified. Instead, due to the lack of positive identification, the lack of cooperation from Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Johnson's demeanor and actions, for example, trying to leave the scene, officers attempted to detain him until he could be positively identified. Again, officers did have valid cause to arrest Mr. Johnson at this point for the crimes that were committed in their presence. Mr. Johnson resisted this detainment and was arrested after a short struggle. He was arrested and lodged for resisting and obstructing arrest. To go into the individual categories that were mentioned or allegation areas that were mentioned by Mr. Johnson. For kidnapping, Mr. Johnson was ID'd as the suspect of a dogs at large and dangerous dogs case when he arrived on scene and identified himself as the owner of the animals. Officers have the legal right to positively identify suspects of criminal cases, and failure to provide information when legally asked by officers is interfering by Kalamazoo City Ordinance. Mr. Johnson also advised that he did not have his ID on him when he had just been observed driving on a public roadway in a vehicle. Officers observed 3 misdemeanor violations in their presence, which allow for a warrantless arrest of a person. Those being dogs at large, dangerous dogs, and driving without a license. The arrest of Mr. Johnson was made in compliance with Michigan law and was within KDPS policy. During the investigation, both dogs were also found to be unlicensed. In regards to kidnapping, in regards to the assault, PSO Turberg does extend his left open hand during his contact with Mr. Johnson, which contacted Mr. Johnson's left shoulder and chest area for approximately less than 1 second. This was done when Mr. Johnson was upset and yelling at officer and while he's moving towards PSO Turberg. Officers reported that the physical contact was made for the purpose of maintaining a safe distance from Johnson. This does not meet the threshold for an assault and battery, which requires intent and forceful, violent, and offensive touching, according to MCL 750.81. However, this case was also reviewed by the Kalamazoo County prosecutor, who issued charges against Mr. Johnson and not against PSO Turberg. In regards to the armed robbery, Mr. Johnson was arrested for a felony charge and was lodged overnight at the Kalamazoo County Jail, where he could not provide proper care for the dogs. Officers did wait unseen until it was confirmed that Mr. Johnson would be lodged overnight prior to seizing the dogs, as they would have released the dogs to his care if he was going to be able to bond out and be able to take care of the dogs. Again, the dogs were unlicensed, they were visibly injured, and they were unable to safely or reasonably be left overnight inside of a vehicle. Mr. Johnson's wife did arrive on the scene and was given the opportunity to provide her information to be able to retrieve the dogs from animal control. However, she chose not to provide her information. The officers did legally retrieve the dogs from the vehicle and release them to animal control per policy, and they were able to retrieve those dogs based off of the vehicle exception, probable cause, and exigent circumstances. For additional information, again, Mr. Johnson did know us several times during my investigation and even here tonight that he believed that all 3 officers knew him by sight, which was part of the reason why he did not believe he had to identify himself further. I asked all 3 of them during their interviews, and all 3 said that they did not know him by sight and that they did not think they'd had any prior contact with him. None of the officers had any previous contacts with Mr. Johnson noted in iLeads, and the only one other noted contact he has had in iLeads. Additionally, Mr. Johnson did refer during my initial conversation with him to PSO Perez as PSO Rodriguez during our contact. It could be that he believed PSO Perez was another officer or a different officer, but we also do not employ a officer Rodriguez. I also don't have this on the slide, but because he mentioned it during his appeal, all 3 officers were asked if they had used any sort of illegal narcotics on that shift or prior to. All 3 said no. All 3 also advised that they did not have any indications that their partners were under the influence of any illegal narcotics. Additionally, a command officer was on scene or did respond to the scene, and he did not know any indications that officers were under the influence of any sort of illegal narcotics. Officers at Kalamazoo Public Safety, too, just to put it out there, are subject to a random drug screen, and those occur on a monthly basis, and those are randomized. So in regards to my summary and findings, the Office of Professional Standards conducted a fair and impartial investigation into this complaint. The complaint was investigated by gleaning information from iLeads, the iLeads report, watching video camera footage, and doing personal interviews. As you know, the Office of Professional Standards is bound by 5 disposition codes: unfounded, exonerated, not sustained, sustained, and misconduct not based on the complaint. For exonerated, it's when the investigation discloses that the alleged act occurred, but the act was justified, lawful, or proper. After a complete investigation, the Office of Professional Standards gave a recommendation of exonerated for all 3 allegations. The recommendation was supported by the Chief of Public Safety, and the complaint was closed on June 30th, 2020. As noted by DCM Moore, we did have a finding for a misconduct other, which had to do with a body camera violation. The recommendation of misconduct other was made and supported by the Chief of Public Safety, and the involved officer received a coaching for the policy violation. I'm going to use a moment to pull up the video, and we're going to watch the video. Does anybody have any questions though before we go into the video review, or would you like to save those for after?
I think we should move forward.
I'm going to stop the share on this one. Bear with me just for a second.
Or you're gonna have to click that one thing when you pull it up. So go ahead and click share
Share
screen.
screen.
And then share, click on share computer sound down in the lower left,
Okay,
and then go to your,
this one.
yeah, whatever the watch card is. That's not it. What is your watch card?
It's behind it. I'm going to mute just for a second while I figure this out. I apologize.
Okay.
I'm having some difficulty here. Can anybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes. Officer Giles, this is Larry Talbert. Are there 2 videos since there were 3 police
I can't hear
officers?
you.
There are 2 videos. However, I was only planning to show one that was on for the entire duration of the incident. And I was also only going to show it from the time that Mr. Johnson arrives on scene until the resolution of the incident.
Can I ask for it to be, shown from the beginning, before I even roll, before animal control arrived and everybody arrived? Can we watch it from the beginning?
I'm going to leave that option up to Mr. Payne for the sole purpose of it's a long video. It's about 12 minutes in, 13 minutes in before he even arrives on scene. So that is up to you, sir.
If the board needs to view that video, we will have access to it, Mr. Johnson, and we will be able to view it. So I don't think that we necessarily need to see it tonight, but in our deliberations, if we feel that we need to see it, we certainly will.
Can you advise real quick, can you see my current screen in regards to WatchGuard?
I cannot see something loading, but
Yeah.
Okay, but all right. Just want to make sure you can see something though. All right. Okay, so this is animal control on scene, and this is Mr. Johnson arriving in the vehicle right behind him.
I don't know. Look at the condition of these guys.
Are these your dogs? Okay. They don't have collars. I got it. Go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and throw them in your car real quick. Come on. They're both yours?
Yeah. Let them go. Let them go.
They were running in the road and almost got hit.
Smoke. 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 Lady. How the fuck y'all get out?
You want to get them in the car so they don't run off again?
Yeah.
We are doing very little right now when it comes to this, so I'm pretty much just going to kind of give them a warning. We can't send people to court now. We're basically not doing anything right now unless it's an emergency. So
Okay.
it's just what we're told. But yeah, if you guys want to do, I mean, it's basically it's vet care, whatever, you know, for hair treatment, skin treatment, whatever. Look what it looks like. I didn't look too close at it, but I will. But yeah, no, we ain't doing squat right now. That's pretty much life threatening.
Sergio Perez.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ooh, your finger's a little cut up.
Oh.
Did it bite you?
No, I'm not sure of that.
Yeah.
No.
Really not?
No. The best case we have right here is animals at large. Like he was saying, this is, you know, we can't prove that he like has the dog fight. The dogs are fighting, but
No, I meant like
all
how
skin care
because they're
and-
sick.
but they're fed. But you know they're fed. You can't tell they're sick.
Anyone, you said you're clear? Thank you.
They're sick.
You got your ID on you?
For what?
We need to identify you.
My name Marcus Johnson.
Do you have your ID on you?
No, I just identified myself.
I need your full name
My
and
name
date
is
of birth.
Marcus Johnson. I just
Calm
identified
down.
myself. You calm down, brother.
You calm down.
I just identified myself.
I need everything, okay?
I just gave
How do you
my
spell
name.
Marcus?
Hold on. You spell it. You know how to spell Marcus? I just told you who my name is.
I need your name.
Lower your voice, first of all.
You've been yelling at me,
Hold on, first of all,
okay?
give me 6 feet first. First of all, give me 6 feet.
Marcus, listen.
Give me 6 feet first.
No.
I just told you my name, Marcus Johnson, bro. I just identified myself. That's all. I just identified myself.
I need first,
I
middle,
gave you my
last,
name,
and date of
Marcus
birth.
Johnson, 11/22/79. I just identified myself. All the extra shit, miss me with it.
Spell your first name for me.
My name, Marcus Johnson, 11/22/79.
How do you spell your first name?
MARCUS. The Zach Spain
That's the one
say.
at 6 feet.
He ain't giving me 6 feet. He ain't giving it to me.
You're coming closer to me.
You shut up.
You're acting like a child.
Hold on, you acting like a child, cause first of all, you ain't gonna do this shit to me.
I thought you wanted 6 feet. Now you're walking up on
No,
me.
man.
What's your middle name?
I just, man, hold on, excuse me.
Marcus, you're not free to go. What is
I'm
your
under
middle name?
arrest. I'm under arrest.
You are. Tell me your name.
You just
What is
assaulted
your
me.
middle name?
You just assaulted me.
I did not assault you.
Did
What is your
did
middle
did
name,
you just
Marcus?
touch me?
Okay.
Did you just
You're
touch
gonna go in cuffs until we can formally identify you. Okay?
I just told you who I was.
Nope. You're going into cuffs. Stop resisting right now. Stop resisting.
Don't
What?
make this work.
Look, come
Listen,
on.
turn around. You're going to be detained for now, okay? Because you're not cooperating with us. Just turn around. You're going to be detained.
I just told him who I was,
Marcus,
man.
relax, dude.
But I told him who I was.
Turn around and relax.
Now I told him who I
You're going to
was.
end up going
I
to
ain't
jail
com-
for something
I ain't
stupid.
committed no crime.
You did. You are driving here. You do not have a valid license on you. We watch you drive here and you're not providing an ID.
Listen, he told me to
Turn around.
identify
Listen,
myself,
you're
bro.
gonna be detained, okay?
I ain't committed no
Stop.
crime,
You have.
man.
Stop. Relax.
I ain't committed
Turn
no
around. Turn around.
I ain't committed no crime,
Relax,
bro.
Marcus. Relax. You're okay. You're gonna be detained till we can figure out who you are. Then you'll be. Listen, I don't know who you are.
Man,
Stop.
listen, man. You hurt my wrist, bro. I'm telling you, I ain't committed no crime,
Marcus,
man.
stop right now.
Man, I ain't committed no crime.
You
man.
have.
What crime I committed, man?
Dogs at large is the first one. That's what I need to identify you.
I identified myself, bro.
Stop resisting.
Man, hold on, man. Let me go, man. Man, come on, man. I ain't did shit, man.
Marcus, I'm telling you now, you're gonna be thrown on the ground if you do not
I ain't
stop.
done nothing, man.
Put this hand behind your back.
Man, listen, man. Y'all scaring me, bro. I ain't done shit. Y'all
Hold
scaring
this.
me, man.
Cooperate.
Y'all scaring me. I ain't done shit, man. Y'all scaring me, bro. I ain't done shit, bro. I ain't done nothing, man.
We're gonna listen. You're gonna be pepper sprayed if you don't put this hand behind your
I
back.
ain't done nothing, though. I came and got these goddamn dogs out the street. You already assaulted me.
You're under arrest. Okay?
Man, what? Man, why the fuck did you?
Take a step. You're under arrest.
Why did you say you assaulted me, man?
No one's assaulting you. All you gotta do is comply.
I already complied.
All you do.
How the fuck I ain't complied? I told you who I was, man. But I told you who I was,
Spread your legs for me.
Why
Spread your legs for me.
Listen, why is he study doing this, Torres?
Probably gonna have to take the dogs now.
Yep.
So.
Why am you taking my... Hey, bro.
Spread your legs for me.
Hey, bro. Take my car to the house for me, man.
Your car's not good to go yet.
You see, you crazy than a motherfucker.
Okay. Take a step back. Stretch
You
your legs.
told me you finna take my dog. My dog's in my car, man.
Stretch your legs.
grab that side and then I'll get my side.
4923 North
Yep,
Burdick Street, 923 North Burdick Street. Parker got a call from IKEA. David Willis is calling her. He currently is trying to leave in the area.
Let go. I'm gonna stay on the car.
Yeah, put their vehicle, get you here.
That was you? I'll tell him that you're tied up here.
Yeah. Now 4-2 is Bruce.
Man, why are you study doing my man? You study
Hey, I'm gonna double lock these cuffs and check them for tightness, okay? I don't want them too tight on you, and I don't want them to continue to tighten up once you get in the
Man,
car.
I got PTSD with you motherfucking police. You scaring me, man.
Turn
You
around.
already put your hands on my
Turn
chest.
around.
All that.
Turn around.
Damn, say that shit, man. Relax, dude. But listen, he shouldn't touch me. He just gave me 6 feet. I identified myself and all that, cuz. I'm starting to get fucked up, man. And I got PTSD, cuz. I'm telling you, you motherfucking police make me nervous, cuz.
No, this is Crooks. Mine's in front of animal control.
All right, we'll put them in yours. Come on.
923 North
No,
Burdick.
put me in yours. Man, look at my wrist, bro.
All right, we're gonna take a look when we get over there. You gotta stop moving around.
What the fuck? I'm telling y'all what it is, man.
I can hear you fine. You don't need to look at me. Lean up against the car. We're gonna fix the cuffs.
What's your name, Terry Bird?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm all right. You done assaulted me. I'm telling you, I'm letting you know you done assaulted me. I'm letting it be known you done assaulted me. You should have never touched me. I gave you my name. You should have ran. That's what you should have did. And you assaulted me.
Both good? All right.
Face me. Put your button first.
So you did turn it off for the interest of time unless you want to continue watching, but the rest of it is him being in the backseat of the vehicle and eventually going to jail. But the video itself is 59 minutes long. Are you guys good with this portion of it for right now?
Yeah, if we need to watch more of it, we will make that request.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share then. All right. Does anybody have any questions?
I would like to know what felony was he charged with?
He was charged with resisting and obstructing arrest, which is a felony charge here in the state of Michigan.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Why did they wait till he got the dogs in the car before they said anything to him about, the violations?
Because the dogs were still loose at that point. It's a residential neighborhood, and at one, we didn't see that part of the video, but the one was acting aggressively towards officers. It was safer for the officers involved and for the residents to make sure that those dogs were contained before they did further investigation.
The officers seemed calm.
I'm sorry.
The officers didn't seem like they were afraid.
I can't say if they were afraid. The one was aggressive. Just because it wasn't aggressive right then in the video doesn't mean that it couldn't have been. And again, that could cause a traffic hazard. They were right there in that main thoroughfare of 131 Business Loop coming in.
Yeah, I know where it's at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Who instructed Mr. Johnson to put his dogs in his car?
I think it was animal control and the officers saying, hey, you get them in the car before, I think the comment that was said, before they run off again or something along those lines. But he was told to put them in his car.
Yeah, he followed your instructions and placed those animals in his car.
Yes, correct.
And you interviewed Mr. Johnson, is that correct?
Yes.
Victor, how long did Mr. Johnson's interview with you last?
His first one, at least 30 minutes, but I'm thinking probably closer to 40 minutes. I can tell you exactly. Actually, I might have it in my report if you bear with me for a second. I don't have it noted, but I can go and easily find it. I have the recording on my computer.
30-minute approximately. You said there was a second interview?
I've talked to Mr. Johnson on the phone a few times in regards to this incident. Part of it was just keeping him apprised of this of the investigation. You know, the case is currently with the chief. He's getting ready to review it. And then I called him afterwards to tell him about the disposition of it.
In the packet that we received, there was one interview, and it was indicated that there was not a second interview because of the COVID-19.
Yep, we didn't do an in-person interview due to COVID-19. However, I did a phone interview with him, that initial one. The follow-up contacts were solely, again, for the purpose of keeping him updated on the case itself.
Now, when you stopped Mr. Johnson, and he did not have his driver's license available to you, is it standard operating procedure and policy for the police when there is a stop with reasonable suspicion to do a DMV call?
Meaning to run a lean check if you're stopping a vehicle? I'm sorry, I'm just not understanding your question.
My question is, could you have ascertained whether or not he had a valid driver's license by calling in the license plate number of his vehicle and his name?
Possibly, and I'll hit on both of those because those are separate. If we would have had his full name and his date of birth, we could have been able to call in and find out if he had a valid driver's license. Again, we wouldn't have positive identification. It would be verbal only, essentially. So we would still need that photo identification to say that that goes to the other person. When it comes to the vehicle, yes, we can run a plate on a vehicle. And if he would have been the registered owner, it then runs the registered owner. But I don't know if he was the registered owner of that vehicle. So kind of, or sometimes is, I guess, the best answer for that one.
Now, sometimes when our officers stop people who are driving without driver's license, is it in fact an option for them to provide that person with driving with a no ops, write them a ticket and send them on their way?
Yes.
So the option was there for Mr. Johnson as well, to give him a no ops ticket. Thank you for coming and get your dogs and we'll see you. Is that correct?
Correct. That was an option. Again, though, with positive identification. And can I touch on something? We just looked it up. My initial interview with him was just over 26 minutes. My partner looked it up while we were sitting here.
Especially given the exigent circumstances where Mr. Johnson rushed out of his home to retrieve those dogs, concerned about public safety. But let's move on. In your interviews with PSO Perez, PSO Turberg, and PSO Crooks, your first interview was with PSO Perez, correct?
I believe my first one actually might have been with PSO Turberg. They were all done on the same day. So one was at 9:06. Stand by just for one.
Those interviews were conducted.
Yeah, they're in chronological. Yeah, so my first one was with Officer Perez.
As I indicated, and they were conducted on the 19th. And your second interview was with Officer Turberg?
Yes.
And your final interview was with Officer Crooks, is that correct?
Yes.
And the summary reports that you provided were almost identical in nature in terms of the descriptors used for PSO Perez and PSO Turberg, is that correct?
What do you mean by descriptors?
The language that they used to describe the dog, for example, as one example, and the other language that was used in those reports. It was repetitive language.
Probably.
Okay, and so your interview with Officer Perez lasted 24 minutes. Your interview with Officer Turberg lasted 18 minutes. And your interview with Officer Crooks lasted 15 minutes.
Okay.
And so you were able to ascertain the same amount of information in 24 minutes that you ascertained in 18 minutes or 15 minutes over the same incident. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Mrs. Johnson came to retrieve or came to check on her husband, correct?
She came to retrieve the vehicle. He had asked that it not get towed, and he had asked another. I'm sorry.
She came to retrieve the vehicle.
Correct.
She had a conversation with the animal control officer.
Yes.
And he asked for some sort of identification, and she said she chose not to do that.
Correct. She said that she didn't want her names kind of put on the dogs at that point.
And your officers were there, or they heard that conversation.
Yes, they were standing there.
And but at that point, how did Mr. Johnson's wife arrive? Did she walk up, drive up, or what did she do?
I have no idea. That's not clear from body camera footage.
That's not part of your investigation.
No.
She drove up in my other van.
She drove up in the other van.
Yes.
Okay. Now, and correct me if I am wrong here. You gave to Mrs. Johnson money, marijuana, and the keys to the car. Is that correct?
The vehicle was released to her.
Yeah.
When it comes to the money, I'm not certain of the money. The marijuana was inside the vehicle, and the vehicle was released to her. So yes.
In your report, you say that you gave her those items.
And I'm sure it's a long report, and this was written
And
a little bit ago.
And you released that Mercedes Benz to her, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever ask her for a driver's license or a positive ID?
Not that I observed in body camera footage.
Speak up, I can't hear you.
Not that I observed in body camera footage.
Did you make that a part of your investigation?
Did I what?
Did you investigate to see if your officers asked her for positive ID as they were turning over marijuana and other valuables, including the keys to the Mercedes, to this woman who said she was his wife?
And 2 dogs.
And 2 dogs. But the dogs did not go with her.
Correct. The dogs did not go with her. And no, I don't know if she was positively identified.
Okay. You were meticulous in indicating that the time of your interviews with the officers, correct?
Yes.
You indicated the time that they began and the time that they ended, correct?
Correct.
Can you share with the board what the discussion was prior to the official beginning of the interview?
Before the official interview, I usually talk to the officers about Garrity rights and whether or not they're going to be read for that specific investigation. I ask them if they've ever done an IA investigation before an interview, and tell them that sometimes I'm going to ask questions that seem a little bit strange, and that they would think I would probably know the answer to. Sometimes I ask them to define what probable cause is. And I give them a warning saying if I ask kind of those oddball questions, it's not because I don't know, it's because I need to know that they know what it is. So I give them just a brief introduction to what the interview is going to, kind of the formatting of the interview, and then talk about whether or not Garrity will be right at the point of Garrity.
But during that process, that pre-interview process, there's no discussion about the substance of the interview.
No, meaning the questions? No.
Or information related to the questions, not the questions themselves.
No, so they have when they come into the investigation, they know, they receive a letter when a complaint is filed against them, stating we're investigating a complaint made by this person on this date. So they do have some background information, at least, of what the investigation would be about.
In your report, you indicate that Officer Crooks made an honest error in not turning her video cam on. Is that correct?
What I believe to be an honest error, yes. She was originally on scene with officers, which originally didn't require the body camera to be on. And during the course when Mr. Johnson arrived on scene, that should have per policy been activated at that point. She did have camera footage for incidents before that incident and right after that incident. And she is a newer officer. She's only been employed, at that point, she'd only been employed for just over a year. So it was believed that it was not a repeated offense or something that that it's not a normal occurrence. Sorry.
Are there any accountabilities for an officer not having that body cam on?
Yes, she received a coaching for it, for the policy violation.
Received a what?
A coaching for the policy violation.
A coaching.
Yes.
Could you explain what that is?
A coaching is a, are you able to pull up policy 310? I can actually read you the actual definition that we have in our policy here in a moment if you allow me to look it up real quick. But it's a form of corrective behavior, for a lack of a better word. It's not considered discipline for the purpose of being able to grieve it. However, it is a form of corrective action. It's kind of the first step in our corrective action measures.
Thank you. Couple of other questions and then
yeah,
to deliberations. Is it within police policy, your policies, if you have someone without a driver's license, to follow them home and to allow them to retrieve that driver's license?
No, we do not allow that. Same with a suspended license. A lot of times people ask, hey, can I just drive home? Can you just follow me where I'm going? That would open the department up for liability, or pretty significant liability, if during that, even if it was a block or two, if they were to hit somebody or get in any sort of traffic violation.
Okay. I'll stop there and defer to the board for any additional questions that you might have before we move out into our deliberative session. Member Dennison, please.
Who? Thank you, Investigator Gals. Who was it that was saying? Which officer was it saying "stop resisting" in that video? It seemed they were saying it pretty quickly. Was that? I apologize, but was that Officer Turberg, PSO Turberg?
I believe they both were, and I apologize for the video. It sometimes does some buffering, so the mouthing is a little bit off than the actual the voiceover, the audio that you're hearing. But both of them are telling them, and then it's Officer Perez who's the one that is trying to de-escalate a little bit more by saying, just calm down. We just need to identify you. That's his voice that kind of has that message during it. But both of them are saying, hey, put your hands behind your back, stop resisting.
So how, you may not know the answer to this, but how soon after Officer Turberg, or after PSO Turberg began to effect the arrest, did he ask Marcus to stop resisting?
I don't know, but I think it was probably within seconds, and I could look it back up. Solely because the physical confrontation where they're actually hands-on was very, very quick, in my opinion, before they were able to de-escalate and get him into handcuffs. That it wasn't extended, so I would say seconds, but that's a guess.
Was this a Terry stop?
No.
Did any of the PSOs suspect a driving infraction or motor vehicle infraction of any kind?
The motor vehicle infraction that was suspected or was the driving without a license on your person, which is a 93 misdemeanor.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
One final question. You state in your report that John
Garcia has a question as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I do too.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I've had a chance to ask.
You can continue, and then I'll ask right after you. No
Okay.
problem.
You characterize Mr. Johnson's behavior as being argumentative. Could you explain that a little bit for me?
Yeah, he was loud with officers when they were asking for reason, or what I would consider reasonable things. Hey, can you just spell your name for me? For Marcus specifically, I've seen it spelled with a K, I've seen it spelled with a C, I've seen it spelled with a QE. So, hey, can you spell your name for me? What can't you spell? So having that kind of that pushback out of officers for what it should have been viewed as a reasonable request. Mr. Johnson was a little bit loud, and only through my repeated contact with Mr. Johnson, I've now found that that's kind of just, that's how he talks. But that being officers, the first time that they've made contact with them, didn't recognize that at the point. And again, that's only been through repeated contacts with Mr. Johnson. And he's even told me himself that he's just a little bit loud just when he, especially if it's something he's passionate about.
Yeah. Now, I'm 75 years old, been around the block maybe once, twice. If an officer said to me, you're acting like a child, what would that mean to you? How would you interpret that comment?
For me, I've got a child, she's 6 years old, and sometimes not listening or failing to provide information when I'm asking her stuff, I think I would put that in the context, and I've only got one, so that's the only reference I have for it. But hey, listen, hey, stop arguing, hey, just give me the information. I think the officers wanted to equally get out of there also.
So argumentative on the one hand was a negative, but the officer calling this grown man a child was what?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, please.
Can I ask the board something? Can this Marcus Johnson, can I ask the board a question?
I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, not at this time. No, we have to hear from the rest of these board members.
Yes, sir.
I just have a couple of questions. One of them were his charges dropped at all, or is he kind of following through the process at the moment with regards to this?
No worries, his charges were not dropped. I don't know where he currently is in the process right now. Jury trials for Kalamazoo County are currently suspended due to COVID-19, so they've just been recently going back and doing trials via Zoom. So I think the process is still ongoing, but I think that this case has, and Mr. Johnson might know a little bit better on when his court date is, but no, this case was not dropped. It was pursued by the prosecutor's office.
Thank you. And I do have a couple of follow-up questions, and then I'll be done. I guess one question, just for clarification, and if it's outside the purview, by all means, please tell me. I just wanted to know currently what is the policy in terms of like detaining individuals during the current situation with COVID-19, whether if like you're taking it on a priority basis or like every business as usual for the time being, if you are allowed to answer that as well.
It's for this one specifically, there are restrictions by the Kalamazoo County Jail right now in regards to lodging. And that's why when we asked about when the allegation came up of the armed robbery, meaning that they took the dogs without permission, they waited to make sure that the Kalamazoo County Jail would lodge him first because they were uncertain at that point due to the charge whether or not he would be lodged. So again, had he not been lodged, they intended to release the dogs to his custody. When it comes to detaining individuals, we are operating as normal. If there is a valid arrest, if there's an officer safety concern, if an officer can legally do it, and meaning that they have to, based off of what's presented to them on the scene, they can detain somebody.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And then just to the last two questions. So in terms of training, during your training at KDPS, do you have any training with regards to de-escalations whatsoever in when you have contact with individuals?
Yes, we have de-escalation training. It's part of our crisis intervention training. Crisis intervention, we actually have the first state team, our team that was created in the state. We have Executive Lieutenant Rafael Diaz. He is a trainer in Michigan when it comes to crisis intervention training. He's one of the kind of forefront people for that, and he does teach de-escalation during that training.
Thank you. And lastly, in retrospect, obviously watching the video and the investigation and all that has been happening, would there be any other methods that your officers could have followed in regards to this contact in particular that we're dealing with today, that could have been de-escalated a little better or a little bit more effective?
We can always say that we can do things more effectively or we can be a little bit better. when it came to other options there, the other option was to just write a citation or write a criminal complaint and let Mr. Johnson be on his way. That was their intent. They had no intentions of taking him to jail that day because on the grand scheme of things, it is a minor violation and due to COVID-19. However, because they could not positively identify him, and again, which is the importance of why somebody's positively identified, they had to escalate their response, I guess, for lack of a better word. So no, their intent was to just write the criminal complaint and let him be on his way. However, due to that lack of positive identification.
I'm sorry. Thank you for answering that. I guess what I meant is a little bit more in the towards the latter end of the contact, where it's gone from like you can put your dogs in the car to where is your ID, and then what we've just been discussing of like turn around, put the handcuffs on. So like there is a period of time there so my question is in terms of the de-escalation methods, whether if there's anything that they could have done now in retrospect, and I understand that hindsight is always 2020, but in retrospect on that, would you train your officers in this scenario of doing something a little bit different before threatening with the handcuffs, kind of talk with me, or this is the reason what I need your ID, that kind of stuff? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I wonder if you follow me now.
And we look at all incidents at the point of view from the officer that's on scene at that time. So when it comes to they have done something better, when you're looking back at an incident, you can always second guess yourself. Oh, I could have said this could have helped. In that case, I think that they were actually trying to do a decent job of trying to get the information. Could they have done a better job at explaining why they needed that information? Yes, without a doubt. However, when then Mr. Johnson goes to leave, that escalated that situation because he hadn't been identified. He's now has a vehicle that he could possibly use to take off from that. And I don't think we would have trained officers any differently. They have done stuff differently there? Yes, without a doubt. However, were they legally able to do what they did? Were they within policy on what they did? Yes. And for all of us, for every day, every interaction, it's always a learning opportunity. How can we do better moving forward?
Thank you very much for your answers, and I totally understand that when you're not
Thank you.
there.
I appreciate
I
it.
think we have Mr. Tolbert, and then we have Ms. Buchanan.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Johnson has been in this community quite a while. You had stated that there is no one officer by the name of Rodriguez at KPS. Has there ever been an officer Rodriguez?
I'm going to defer to Assistant Chief Vanderweer real quick. Since I've been here for 15 years, there has not been, but I think there may have been. So just bear with me for one moment.
Yeah, good evening, Assistant Chief Vanderweer here. Yes, sir, there was an Officer Rodriguez. I don't have the date of when he left our department, but it was back when I was in the K-9 unit. So we're probably looking at the early 2000s. So probably close to 15 to 20 years ago for sure that he left our department, and we have not had a PSO Rodriguez since then. But yes, we did have one, but it was several years ago.
Okay, I'll save my other comments for afterwards.
Thank you. Ms. Buchanan?
Yeah, I had one question. You said that you needed to see identification so that you could positively identify him as being who he said he was. And you needed to do that in order to, before you issued citations, because you wouldn't want to assign them to an incorrect person. At what point in the process or in the communication was it made clear to Mr. Johnson that he was going to be receiving some citations for the dogs getting loose? I don't recall that happening as we watched the video, but I could have missed it. So.
No worries. He had mentioned, or an officer had mentioned that they had the dogs at large because he was asking, what do you need my identification for? And he says, There's dogs at large. Whether or not he specifically said, I'm writing a criminal complaint, I'm not certain of that. However, they did tell him that they needed his identification for the report.
Okay, so they ask for the identification. When he says why, they tell him it's for the dogs at large. The conversation didn't go, you know, you're in violation of these ordinances, so thus we need to see your ID. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think of how to best address that and best answer that. And I'm trying to recall back, I've watched this video, but again, this was, if you give me just 1 second, I'm gonna just review my report to see if I have anything in there that addresses that question specifically, and I might not, but stand with me just for 1 moment.
Okay.
I don't see anything documented that I documented, or at least on a quick glance. They did ask, when they'd asked for his identification, he did ask for what, at which point they advised him that they needed to identify himself, or that he needed to identify, he needed to be identified. But no, it is, they do not, as mentioned when talking to Mr. Garcia, could have they done a better job at explaining, yep, this is what we need this for? They could have. I'm not denying that in any way.
Okay.
However, it then, before they had that opportunity to get to that point, is when he's now trying to get into his car and trying to take off from the scene, which then poses these other concerns. So had they been able to sit out there and talk to him for a longer period of time, would have they have gotten around to that? I believe they would have, but I don't know, because that didn't happen.
Okay.
Did any officer ever look in the car to see whether there was a bill for or a license?
No, well, not to my knowledge. Both officers, from reviewing the camera, were at the driver's side door. And then the one officer went around kind of the back side of the vehicle.
Was there a senior officer?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
Was there a senior officer in charge?
The senior officer on scene would have been Officer Perez. They did have a sergeant working for them that day who did later respond to the scene, and that was Sergeant DeFleecourt. But out of the 3 of them, I think Officer Perez got hired. He's been here maybe 8 years. PSO Crooks had been here just over a year, and PSO Turberger was right around the 2-year mark. So Officer Perez, who's a canine handler, was the senior officer on that scene.
Can I just ask, just for clarification, were the car ignition keys in the ignition at the time?
Of the vehicle, I don't know.
Yes.
Okay, officers never searched the vehicle, so I don't know. I don't know what was inside or not inside that vehicle.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board before we go into our deliberative session?
Yes,
I want
So
to
the marijuana came out of his pocket?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for this evening. I'd like to thank you for bringing forth your concerns about your treatment by our police officers. And we will certainly deliberate on this appeal. And I want to thank our Office of Professional Standards for providing us with the information and answering our questions as well. Is there any other business that we need to address during this open meeting?
Can I say one thing before I quit?
Mr. Johnson, I think we're about to wrap it up here, sir.
Okay,
So,
all right, yes, sir.
But thank you so much for coming forward and participating in this process. Thank you, sir. And so I want to remind the board that there is another separate link for the private meeting. So we will see you there in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Thank all. Appreciate it. See you.
watch the whole thing?